At this time, I want to offer the members a chance to ask any questions.
You mentioned sleep and sunlight. What would you say to somebody who, say, goes to sleep at 6 o'clock in the morning and wakes up at maybe 3 in the afternoon? Is that, and they sleep the whole night through, the whole whatever through, would that be considered quality sleep?
As you're saying that, I'm thinking of somebody that works like third shift or something like that, and they're sleeping during the day. But to answer your question, quality sleep, the time that they do it doesn't necessarily matter. But what would matter is the fact of them, once they sleep, they need to be able to come out of that sleep and actually go do something. So being a part of light. So let's say if they're the only time that they have to be a part of light is at nighttime, that's where that light therapy would come in, trying to make sure that they get that amount of light that they would get if they were out during the day, to kind of balance themselves out. And actually taking breaks, switching their schedule up so that their body knows what natural light is.
Any other questions? Yes, we have one over here.
Get a little exercise. Going back to your comments about mental health in schools and some of the acts that you were mentioning that have been proposed, I wonder if any of them, just thinking to the current situation that we have in Michigan, is there anything in there that talks about being proactive to identify young people who might be having mental health issues and bringing them in and giving them evaluation, or is it just we're waiting for people to come to us?
The act itself doesn't talk about being proactive, but having mental health counselors in the school is being proactive. I work with Lawrence, the school district in Lawrence, as a mental health counselor. And what happens is that the process right now is teachers identify things in kids' changes. They see the kids more often than not, right? So they see these changes, and then they'll refer them to a mental health counselor, they're a counselor, and then they'll get in touch with the parent, and the parent says yes, yay, or nay. So actually having the mental health counselor in the school, as much as we have school resource officers in the school, is being proactive.
I think what happened in the Michigan case, and I'm not going to belabor this too much because there's not time, but in that case, the parents were called in, the teacher observed something, and the parents were called in, and the parents refused to act and refused to take the child out of the school. So is there anything that could have been done differently from the mental health perspective is what I want to know.
That's a difficult one for me to answer. I can try to answer it offline. I just caught wind of it yesterday. I don't know when it actually happened, but I just caught wind of it. And when we're talking about, everyone isn't necessarily willing to address their mental health. Everyone isn't even willing to say, yeah, I have a problem. And then at what point do we either, depending on who you are, we violate them and make them get this, or what do we just listen to them saying, oh yeah, I'm okay. There's a thin line for that, but I don't really have an answer for you. I'd love to talk with you offline, but I don't really have an answer for that one.
I think we got time for one more question.
I can't speak for the whole group here, but I think some of us might share the same kind of stresses and anxieties of dealing with the Republican hate and evil motions of government Republicans, lack of help from Republicans. I know it's wrong to hate and it's stressful. I know it's wrong to hate, but it's stressful, and I just want to give us some free tips on how to cope.
Free tips on how to cope with hate.
Or cope with Republicans, I guess that could be the other
Cope. I'll take that one. Okay. Having a conversation. And when I say having a conversation, I don't mean a debate. I mean a conversation. Sometimes, what do we tell kids in school when they're talking to their teacher? It can be a horrible teacher, if there is a such thing as a horrible teacher, I don't know. We're not going to tell them to talk to that teacher in front of the classroom, or we're going to ask them to approach that teacher in a private setting, off to themselves. Now, we can agree to disagree at the end of the day. If they don't see your point, they don't have to see your point. They have the right not to see your point just as well as you have a right not to see their point. But once you're able to get your point off your chest and they're able to get theirs off of their point off of their chest, that helps the situation right there. So the biggest thing is having a conversation. The second thing is understanding that they have a right not to agree with me and I have a right not to agree with them. And then last but not least, based on what I actually believe, putting an action into place to follow up with what I believe. So if I believe in mental health, then my action right now is to be a therapist, to make everyone aware of it. For people that think that there's no therapy opportunities in Greenwood, I want to make sure I tell everybody about the therapy opportunities in Greenwood or in South Carolina or in the United States. I don't know as much about the world. That's my action. I'm putting action into place so that balances out my frustration at somebody else who's not acting or who don't believe what I believe.
We've got one final quick question here.
Brother Searles, I want to ask you a question. In the African Americans family, we have been taught to suppress depression. Don't tell nobody outside the family. And I see that more in African American families today, that it's playing out. It still remains silent. So how can you give us a tip to identify when it's right here in our own homes or anywhere else in the community, in the black community? Let me be specific. Because we have never been taught or to take ownership or responsibility that we're dealing with mental illness, and we don't recognize it as a mental illness issue. And as you said in the beginning, that mental illness goes beyond being bipolar or other alcoholic or drug addicts or something like that. It goes way beyond that, and people just don't know. So that would be my question.
Hopefully I can answer that real quick. Creating a safe space is one of the ways, and what I mean by creating a safe space, we don't have dinners anymore. We don't just sit down and talk. And that's creating a safe space. Having a sit-down dinner, no phones, no TV. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about, not necessarily mental health, but let's just talk about things. And then if I see, based on your responses, how you interacting is not lining up with what's appropriate, is more inappropriate than it is appropriate, then being able to have a discussion about mental health. Also, facilitating those discussions in places where people tend to go. The church community, in the African American community, being able to allow therapists to come in and speak about mental health. In the past, in the African American communities, if you were able to get into the church, you was able to get to African Americans. So therapists, licensed professionals, so on and so forth, have to be willing to actually go into the churches and speak with them. I got another episode that was on that.
Yeah, talking about places to meet, I was just given a reminder that you are to let people know about a meeting you have every fourth.
Yes. Support groups. Great. Support groups is another opportunity to talk about that mental health. And every fourth Monday, starting back again in January, I have a wellness group, support group for BIPOC men. BIPOC men meaning black and indigenous people of color men. every fourth Monday of each month, and we talk about different things like emotional intelligence. We talk about, I can't think of the other stuff that we talk about right now, but we cover mental health, so to speak. Also, if you're looking on the screen here, I have other community resources. Of course, it's Gravity Counseling Group, but then there's Better Mental Health. There's community initiatives which provides free mental health counseling. I don't know as much about the program, but I do know that is there. Carolina Health Service Center provides brief therapy. And then, if none of those fit you, go to these online directories, Psychology Today. You're gonna find therapists that are in Greenwood, Open Path Collective. You're gonna find therapists that's in this area. Talkspace is something that you can do online. And then, of course, if you really needed to, if you had a crisis in the heat of the moment, you can dial 741-741, and then there'll be somebody to respond back to you as you discuss your feelings and emotions.
All right, well, thank you.